What's up, gamers? Welcome back to another After Action Report. My name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going over the event that I went to this last weekend in Covington, Washington, Throwdown at the Campground Round 3. This event was hosted by Deep Strike Gang, the team that I've been playing with up here in the Pacific Northwest for most of the last year. And it takes place at a summer camp, which is owned and operated by one of the members of the team, Torin. So big shout out to Deep Strike Gang and Torin in particular for hosting this event and making it all possible. Throwdown at the Campground is kind of cool because, like I said, it does take place on a campground. We do have all of the games are taking place in what is probably like the dining and event hall that you generally have kind of in the center area. But because it was very nice and kind of hot actually at this event, the ability to go in and out of the building, go outside, you could go walk into the lake if you had wanted to, but it also just creates a really cool environment overall for all of the games that we're playing. At this event, I was playing with one of the two teams that Deep Strike Gang was sending to the event. We had Deep Strike Gang Trusted Concubines, which was my team, and Deep Strike Gang Scheming Eunuchs, which was the other one. People seemingly are getting very into Chinese Imperial court dramas. But Trusted Concubines had 5 of the 8 members that we are planning to take to Wyoming Team Championships, and they were Andrew Mitchell on Awakened Necrons, Griffin Frost on Pact-Bound Zealots Chaos Space Marines, myself on Recon Element Guard, Ken Bush on Tau Empire Montcalm with Storm Surge, and Torrin Holmes on Gaunt Carpet Tyranids. Whether or not these are all going to be the list we're going to be taking to Wyoming is still, going over the final iterations of what it is that we're trying to do, but we wanted to make sure that we were getting good practice with the 5 that we were bringing. One of the things that was a little bit different about this event than a lot of other events that I played at recently is it was entirely using WTC terrain. And it does mean that some of the list building decisions that I had taken to OC5s just a couple of weeks ago and the one that I took to Throwdown at the Campground were, maybe not exactly the same. But the other big thing about this event for me is that this was the last event that I was going to play with Recon before Yarick got released, and then Wyoming Team Championships was going to be with Yarick legal. So I didn't want to put that much time into thinking about what changes I wanted to make between my OC5s list and the list I was taking here to Throwdown at the Campground on WTC, especially because I'm going to be playing a different list in a week anyway. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the list that I actually brought to this event. If you watched my video about OC5s, it is exactly the same list. Nothing has changed at all except for the title. It was 1, 2, 3 Cadian Castellans, 1, 2, 3 Cadian Command Squads with double plasma gun, Gaunt's Ghost, 1, 2, 3 Ogryn Bodyguards with both the huge knife and the Ripper gun, not taking the 4-up invul for the little bit of extra punch that you get. Ursula Creed running around by herself, 1, 2, 3 units of 20 Cadian Shock Troops, 1 unit of 20 Catachan Jungle Fighters, 1, 2, 3, 4 units of 10 Death Corps of Krieg, 1, 2 units of 10 Attilan Rough Riders, 1 unit of 5 Death Riders, 1, 2, 3 units of 5 Krieg Engineers with trench clubs instead of the shotguns, 1 unit of 5 Ratlings, and 1 Scout Sentinel. I've done a lot of videos at this point about Recon Element, both talking directly with Wesley St. Hines as well as some general thoughts on how you're going to be playing the detachment in general. So if you're more interested in all that kind of stuff, I recommend going to check some of those out. But the big idea here is, of course, this army is way more difficult to remove than a lot of people think it is. It's got a really powerful stratagem package against melee armies. It's got a really powerful detachment rule against shooting armies. And then you just have so much OC and so much control of the board throughout the course of the game that you are just going to be able to do anything that you really need to over the course of the entire game. For our first round, we ended up playing against Rain City Witch Pigeons, a team that mostly plays out of Waystone Speakeasy up in Ballard in Seattle. And they were playing Aiden Young and his Death Guard, April and her Cavalite Cartel Drukhari, Isaac Wong and his Black Templars Bastion Task Force, Jake and his 5 big Chaos Knights, I think it was in Lords of Dread, and Matt Cargill and his Necrons Awakened Dynasty. I don't really know how pairings went for this first round, but I ended up playing up against April and the Cavalite Cartel Drukhari. Cavalite Cartel functions fairly similar to Invasion Fleet in the idea that you pick one of 3 buffs at the beginning of the game. The difference here is that Cavalite Cartel picks 1 unit on the other side. You get a certain buff based on what unit you picked, and then if you kill that unit, you can change what buff you end up getting for a stratagem later in the game. The army included 2 Archons, one of which had a free rapid ingress, Drazar, who's just kind of a beat stick, Lady Malice for a Vect and redeploys, 1, 2 units of 10 Cavalite Warriors that are split into 4 5s through the use of Venoms, 1 Chronos for pain token refunds, 1, 2 units of Hellions for reactive move and just, decent skirmishing pieces, 2 units of 5 Incubi who are pretty good, melee beat 6 as well, 1 unit of Mandrakes for scoring and up-down stuff, 2 Ravagers with Disintegrator Cannons instead of the Dark Lances, 1 unit of Reavers for Go Infinity Inches, 3 units of 5 Scourges, all with Dark Lances, some much-needed anti-tank in the matchups where that's relevant, and then 3 Venoms for the jump out, do things, get back into the car, and then be annoying to remove. Overall, I had this matrixed as about a 13. The main thing about Cavalry Cartel is it's going to have sustained hits basically across its entire army, basically the entire game. And 1 CP, you can get crit 5s and the Ravagers with full reroll hits. I think it's against units at starting strength. Generally means that their 9 shots of like plasma ends up becoming something in the neighborhood of 15 hits. But I do think in retrospect, I ended up over-respecting April's damage output. One of the big things that I really needed to recognize about this game is that April had about 400 points over the 3 Scourges, just tied up in a total of 12 Dark Lances. And while Scourges are very good units in general, they are not useful in this matchup at all. The general game plan of this game, of course, was that I was going to try and hold this every single turn, and I was going to try and prevent April from holding hers. And I was pretty successful at that game plan. There was a funny moment in the bottom of 1 where I had taken like my 20 Catachan and spread them out something like this, and April ended up drawing a tempting target and secured no man's land. While I just naturally said that this was going to be the tempting target, April ended up setting out like a unit of Hellions somewhere in here. I overwatched 2.5 of them to death, so there's only 2.5 of them remaining, and took like a Ravager and some other shooting and got the Catachan unit pretty far down, and then the Hellions charged in trying to get the second unit off at the point, and also to get that second secure no man's land. And I end up living here with just 2 dudes, which, with an insane bravery, ends up being 4 OC as compared to only the 3 OC from the 3 remaining Hellions, meaning that April not only scored -3 because she only got the small secure no man's land, but I also insane braveried for +5. So the fact that I end up having 2 dudes just living here end up being at least an entire diff point going in my favor. But probably the most important part of this round was going into the bottom of 2. I had an opportunity in the bottom of 2 to rapid ingress what I was planning to be my 27 brick, my cast-on brick that was currently off the board. The general idea was that it was going to come down somewhere over here where it was going to be very difficult to shoot. And then on my next turn, it was going to hop over this wall, charge a couple of things, shoot a couple of things, and create a lot of control over this objective right here. My worry about this entire play was that I was going to have to deal with the fact that April is probably going to rapid ingress the Archon and the Incubi somewhere in here, maybe somewhere in here, and the charges were going to be very difficult because my opponent was going to be able to rapid ingress and then heroic. And I had not done any math with the Archon plus the Incubi about how many guardsmen they actually were going to kill. And so around this time, I go to talk to all of the other people on my team, saying, hey, I think I can probably get about a +3 here if things go well, but it'll probably also be like a -3 if things go poorly, and I don't really know which one it's going to be. So at this time, I go find out that we have 1 player is going to be getting a pretty darn big win. We have 3 other players that are looking to be draws plus or minus a couple. And so at the time, I thought I was still on track for the 13 that I initially said I was going to be getting. And knowing that getting that 13 would mean that my team was on track to win meant that I didn't need to do anything risky. So I decided to leave the brick off the table and instead reinforce over here with, I think, some horses, just to make absolutely sure I was never going to be losing my side of the board. And from there, the game more or less went as I kind of expected. I controlled this every single turn. April never controlled this one. On like turn 4, I brought out like 2 units of dudes like over this way. So there's like a brick here, like a brick here, like a brick somewhere in here. And I was just putting pressure to try and take this, and hopefully these guys were going to be able to go and just hang out on April's home objective so she didn't score a 13 or a 15 at the end. It was around turn 4 or so where 2 things happened. One, my captain came over, looked at my score, saw that I was currently up 15-5, and said, this cannot change, we need you to lock in that score to win the round. And I go, oh no, I can't do anything. I don't think I'm likely to get a 15 from this point. I think maybe a 14 is still possible, but a 15 is definitely off the table because one of the other players on the team had a couple of terrible turns in terms of actually putting score up. What looked like a draw originally ended up coming back as a 0. Unfortunately, it was too late in my game to really do anything to try and swing points anywhere. But the other thing that I learned was when the Incubi and the Archon actually like made contact with, I think it was this brick here, they only killed like 15-ish guardsmen, which makes me think that if I had just gone for the rapid ingress play over here and marched over this way, it probably would have just worked. And even though I don't put the same amount of pressure on my opponent's home, just having, you know, this maybe scoring an extra point of primary in there probably gets me an extra diff point or 2. April did say at the end of the game that she thought that I should have just disrespected her army more. And I think that's probably true. I've been having a lot of issues, as I think a lot of people do, in that I am overestimating how much damage I'm going to take. And the Incubi with the Archon, yeah, they killed like 15 to 18 guardsmen, somewhere in there. But that's not the whole thing. And then that unit falls back and shoots and has so many plasma guns and a couple melta guns that I probably just kill it back. And the game plan more or less goes what I expected. I held this every single turn. I stopped this every turn except for the last one. I ended up walking away from this one 79 to 61, which is a 13 to 7, which is exactly what I had matrixed in the first place. At the end of it, 4 of our boards went as we expected. Ken ended up getting a really big win. I got the 13 I was on track for. Griff and Andrew are both a draw, plus or minus a couple. Unfortunately, Torrent sounded like he had some really bad incidents on his board. A couple of things really didn't go his way. He ended up coming back with a 0. And so what was looking like a comfortable low 60s win ended up being a draw 53 to 47. Perhaps not the result we were wanting, but it's the result we ended up getting. With a draw in the first round, we ended up going up against Heroic Knights Livewire. They had 4 Heroic Knights teams here, and I think they were all named after different kinds of Mountain Dew. This team had Caleb and his Emperor's Children, Joseph and his Imperial Knight, Justin Salazar and his Death Watch, the same Justin I played at the Laughing Dragon, Peter Venner and his Grizzle Company combined, the same Peter I played at Tacoma Open who was running Recon but with a Storm Sword, and then Sam Adams and his World Eaters. Again, I don't really know how pairings went in this one, but I ended up pairing into Peter once again and his Grizzle Company. Peter is playing Grizzle Company with Gaunt's Ghost, Lord Solar, a Cadian Castellan, 2 Cadian Command Squads, a Militarum Tempestus Command Squad, a Rogal Thorn Commander with the Meltas instead of Stubbers, 1 20-man of Cadians, 1 10-man of Cadians, so the 20 plus a Cadian Command Squad and a Castellan, and the 10 plus the other Cadian Command Squad and Lord Solar, 1 unit of Kazarkin, 3 units of Death Corps of Krieg, 1 unit of 5 Scions with the Militarum Tempestus Scions, 1 Hellhound with an extra heavy flamer, 1 Luminor's Vanquisher with multi-meltas, and 2 Luminor's Demolishers also with multi-meltas. Peter and I ended up playing this one on Crucible Battle Scorched Earth, and I had this one initially matrixed as like a 14. In general, I tend to be pretty conservative in my matrix. I generally assume I'm going to be playing a pretty strong player, and I also generally make an assumption that there's not really going to be a lot of risk taken on my side. One of the big things about this game is that Peter had a lot of choices in army that had less volume than it potentially could have. The Vanquisher puts out like a total of 7 shots plus like a stubber, right? That's just not killing that many guardsmen. The Dorn, having the Melta gun instead of the extra stubbers, was losing out on like 10 shots. The Demolishers going from D6 plus 3 to D6 plus 1 was also losing a couple of shots, and the multi-meltas is just a lot less. So I really was not worried about my opponent's ability to actually kill me. Once again, the plan doesn't really change. I'm going to try and hold this really hard. I'm going to try and prevent Peter from holding this every single turn. If things are looking good, I would like to burn this at some point, or maybe burn my opponent's home if I can put enough pressure on them, and just use the fact that I can stage in here and create a lot of pressure this way, here and here, and also just have a bunch of guys ready to go here, just hop this wall turn after turn in order to create pressure on my opponent's objective. One of the things that makes it a little bit harder to push diff on Scorched Earth, especially if you're going first, is the fact that if you aren't tabling your opponent, what you can typically see is your opponent will hold their home every turn. So they're going to go 5, 5, 5 on turns 2 through 4. And then on the last turn, they're probably going to get a 15 for holding their home, holding 1 somewhere, and then burning 1 of them as well. So it's really hard to stop your opponent from scoring 30 primary on Scorched Earth unless you are taking their home. And then if you want to score at least 1 point and your opponent gets 100, all you need to do is find 21 points of cards in order to get over that 51 points. And I'm not going to lie, I think there was only one thing that happened in this game that was particularly surprising. We ended up having engineers go back and forth over here, and the engineer on engineer combat was ridiculous. We had more engineer and engineer combat on here. There was a funny interaction that we had where I had put like engineers like this on turn 1 in order to score area denial, and also to throw a bomb at the Luminor's Demolisher that was like hanging out in this ruin in deployment. And I had positioned my engineers in such a way, entirely unintentionally, that when my opponent also drew area denial in the bottom of one, that when I had my engineers here, the only way he was going to be able to get inside of the area denial bubble was by charging. And one of the big issues with this, of course, is if you take engineers and charge them into other engineers, the engineers are almost never killing the other engineers in combat. You need to get extraordinarily lucky, and I just needed 1 dude alive on that objective in order to prevent him from getting any points on area denial. And so when Peter goes in, he tries to do a little bit of damage. He shoots like just the Vanquisher shot. He shoots like a las cannon. He shoots like 1 pistol at the unit in order to try and chip him down and try and get himself to a spot where he could actually like charge in and kill all of them. He ended up leaving me alive with like 1 guy like here. But the problem with that was that I had this unit of Catachan just hanging out in this ruin right here, where once he charged, I was able to heroically intervene and put a bunch of guys on the middle objective. And so the area denial ended up scoring for 0. Honestly, it was kind of a funnily similar interaction to the one that I had the previous game with April, where she only got small secure because she only scored the side objective, because I just had dudes on the middle objective at the end of bottom of 1. Probably the other interesting interaction that I had was I had rapid ingress a bunch of horses here in the bottom of 2. And the idea was that they were going to come over here where Peter had like his Cadian Castellan brick. It was somewhere in here, and it had moved up onto the objective. And I was going to take this and try and charge into the dudes, try and kill all of them, kill enough of the OC that Peter was never really going to hold this. And I only managed to get like 5 of the horses to actually like make contact. I just really low rolled my charge roll. And it meant that I only killed like 10 guardsmen. So Peter was able to hold this one on turn 3 because he had, you know, most of the Cadian Castellan break, and he was running a flag, which I just kind of forgot that that was a thing that you could do. So every single one of them was like 3 OC, and he just had so much OC on the objective, even after I charged the horses, even after I put a bunch of Krieg on the objective in order to try and tie it up. But other than that, the plan was more or less the same. We had a unit come out this way. We had a unit going this way. I think we had another unit going like this, in a very similar fashion, actually, to the way that I played up against April. But I was just never able to get to my opponent's home. And even though I held this objective every single turn, I managed to burn it on turn 5. I was still not able to prevent the hold the home, hold this one, burn it on the last turn for the 15. Because of that, I walked away with the end score of 93 to 67, which ended up being a 15 to 5, which is 1 higher than I had initially had on the Matrix. Overall, we won every single board on this one. We had an 18-2 in Tau vs. World Leaders, a 14-6 in Necrons vs. Emperor's Children, a 16-4 in Pactbound vs. Deathwatch, which this matchup is just really not fair. 13-7 in Tyrannies vs. Imperial Knights, and a 15-5 in Guard versus Guard. We ended up walking away with a 76-24. For our third round, we ended up getting paired into the other Deep Strike Gang team, Deep Strike Gang Scheming Eunuchs. They had Tony and his Imperial Knights, David and his Adeptus Mechanicus, Dustin and his Monka Tau, Sam and his Deathwatch, and Tim and his Plague Legion Chaos Demons. The evening before we actually played the round, we agreed that it was going to be way more useful for the people going to Wyoming to just manufacture matchups so that we can actually play them. And one of the matchups that I had not yet played with my Recon was going up against AdMech, and that was the one that I thought was going to be the most useful game for me. I'd played against Tau several times, and I've won it several times as well. I've played against Imperial Knights, and it's just not really a game. You just kind of win. I played against Deathwatch twice at the Laughing Dragon. I don't ever see Plague Legion, so it's just like not a matchup I'm that interested in like spending time learning how to play. And so the only one of these that I thought was particularly useful for me and my development as a player was playing Recon into AdMech. I know we actually did like pairings just for the practices of like understanding how different armies are supposed to end up playing up against each other, and I think we got most of the matchups we wanted in terms of like trying to learn how to play things. But I ended up playing up against David and his Adeptus Mechanicus Halos Creed Battleclade. Dave was playing Belisaria's Call, a Tech Priest Engine Seer. A Tech Priest Engine Seer is a bit of a point filler. 1, 2, 3 units of Rangers in order to make sure he has plenty of battle line and to pass out buffs throughout the course of the Doctrina Imperatives, I think they're called. 1, 2 Scorpius Doom Riders. 1, 2 units of 3 Ballastaria with las cannons. 1, 2 units of Sky Stalkers with the carbines. So these are the move, shoot, move guys. 1, 2 units of 5 Sicarian Infiltrators, 1, 2 units of 10 Sicarian Ruststalkers, and a Scorpius Disintegrator. So this list actually has like 12 shots of las cannon, a lot of it going to be re-rolling, a lot of it going to have sustained. So this list has like 12 shots of las cannon that he's spending a decent amount of points on, but it also has like a decent amount of volume in terms of ignores cover shooting. The big scary things here are of course the Sicarian Ruststalkers, which he can move. Like, I think they move 8 base, and they get, like, +2 to advance and charge, and you can give them advance and charge. And so, realistically, they can go, like, you know, like, 15 pretty easily on an advance, and then they can charge, oftentimes with +2. So, realistically, they're going, like, you know, they're going, like, 14 plus 2d6, or 14 plus 3d6, which is really, really far. And then they have a lot of attacks. They're going to make you take a battle shock when you actually get in. And then you can give them crit 5s with sustained. It's just a lot of attacks coming out. Also, the Sky Stalkers are not bad because they have like 30 shots of which is generally nonsense. I think it's like strength 301 or maybe 401, but regardless, it's just a lot of shots, so you come out and then move immediately backwards. But the rest of it is like not that scary. The Ranger's like okay because they do have the ignores cover built in, but this mostly just has like 2 units that are like, oh my god, I need to be able to control those, and it's the Rust Stalkers. Dave and I played this one on Search and Destroy Hidden Supplies, and you are probably already looking at this and going, wait a second, Joshi, what are all these orange circles on the board, and why are they not in the correct places? So a couple of funny things happened about this game before we actually got into it. Firstly, round 3 started an hour earlier on day 2, then round 1 started on day 1. Round 1 started at 10 a.m. on Saturday, and round 3 started at 9 a.m. on Sunday. And unfortunately, Dave didn't know that, and he did not live particularly close. He woke up at 9 a.m., said like, hey, I'll be there in like 40-ish minutes. So we started this one fairly late. In a normal Teams environment where I was playing this for the team, it is a pretty simple solution. All you do, you set up the table, you set up a chess clock, you start the clock, and then you wait for your opponent to arrive. When your opponent gets there, they're going to be down like 40 minutes. And so in a normal Teams environment, I'd be playing this with like an hour and a half or something on my clock, and my opponent would be playing this with like 40 minutes on their clock, which is kind of an insurmountable time advantage, especially for an army like AdMech that has a lot of moving pieces. I didn't want to do that. I didn't really care. I valued getting good information and a good rep than I cared about actually winning the round. The other big thing is I set up the objectives in the wrong spot. For whatever reason, when I was setting this up in my mind, I measured them all out and set them up as though we were playing Crucible of Battle. And so that does in fact change where the objectives are. The objectives that you see like built into the map is where they're supposed to be, and the red and orange circles are where they were set up. So a couple of things that Dave and I discovered about this board, right? This is not a normal board, but the first one was that this objective is surprisingly hard to attack. If you set up guys in a way that's kind of like this, where you're not getting shot on this angle, then you can make sure that people don't actually walk in through here. But the other big thing that you can do is when you set up guys like along this line is you can make sure that when your opponent charges you, anyone that actually gets through is going to have to come to the other side of the wall. And you can set up very easy heroics. So Dave was kind of left with an uncomfortable choice. Either he could feed me units through this wall, trying to hold down my primary, but then he was very reasonably going to be losing a lot of his Sicarians in ways that were not killing the important units in my army. Or he could try and put like OC on this side of the objective, which I am playing guard. That is not really a real thing you can try and do. Or he could let me hold it. And so the game kind of became one where I was holding this one. I was dumping OC on this side of the wall in order to make sure that Dave wasn't holding it from the other side. And then we were playing the games over these 2 objectives, which again, the objectives were not in the correct place, but neither of us noticed until this morning, so that's kind of what happened. Luckily, because I'm playing guard, it is super easy for me to just dump OC here, and make sure that my opponent is not holding them, and then again, put OC here, such that this is pretty hard for my opponent to actually hold. Perhaps the most interesting thing in this game was in bottom of 3, a couple of things happened. One, there was a unit of like Rust Stalkers. One, there was a unit of Sicarians that had ended up like here. And like another one was like over here. And I took my Cadian blobs and one went like this. The one that was staged here moved like this. And I had another one somewhere over here that all came out. And I was just going to try and do a lot. And this unit comfortably killed like 7, I think, out of a unit that started at 10. And this unit shot here and killed like 2 out of 5, which made the whole interaction very awkward out of nowhere. So I just did a lot less because the stealth is way more impactful into Recon than you might expect. And then over on the other side, he had like the transport bow and then like the gunboat immediately behind it. And I had like a unit of horses coming out this way. And I overcommitted here and then it didn't die. And then I tried to get my horses in and then like the transport like barely died. And it was just really, really awkward overall. And so we both kind of realized that, yes, I probably have the damage to get through things, but I need to make sure I'm allocating in the proper ways. And you never know when you're hitting on 5s going into like all the Sicarians, there's just a possibility that they just don't die. So there was potentially an opportunity for Dave to play this a little bit more aggressively than maybe he's used to. But regardless, going second meant that I was going to be scoring a lot of primary in the last couple of turns. I ended up walking away with this one 85 to 52. Which ends up being a 16-4 for the team. Now, one of the important things about this, now you might be looking at this and going, Joshi, why did you submit an 11 then? One of the conversations I had with Dave at the very beginning, because he showed up like 40 minutes late, was like, hey, I don't want to play this game in such a way where it's just really awkward for both of us. What I would much rather do is you and I are going to talk about trying to get both of us to make the best plays possible so that I get the best kind of like pseudo game out of this for the rest of the event. And we agreed to submit an 11-9 in my favor before the game even started. Overall, we had Ken playing into Sam's Deathwatch. He got a 20. Torrent got a 20 into Dustin's Tau. Griff got a 6 into Team's Demons. Andrew got a 0. I'm not sure exactly what happened here, but it sounded like invulnerable saves ended up not going quite in Andrew's favor. And we walked away with this one with officially a 57-43. That left us in a really interesting spot, because normally Deep Strike Gaming goes into a lot of these events with the idea that it is bad manners to try to win the event that you're hosting. But there were 3 teams at this point that were 2 wins and 1 draw going into the last round. There was Deep Strike Gang, Trusted Concubines, there was Rose City Ruffians, and there was Heroic Knights Voltage? I'm not sure, whichever one their A team was. And we ended up pairing into the Rose City Ruffians. They had Ian and his Monka Tau, Nicholas Olsen Johnson, also known as Naj, playing the Pact-Bound Zealots, Shane and his Emperor's Children, Tanner and his many men Black Templars, and then Tom and his Est Militarum, the same Tom they've often seen in the weekly breakdown videos. I ended up playing up against Naj and his Chaos Space Marine Pact-Bound Zealots, and he had just come off of a GT win called, I think it was Squig City, where he had played his first 5 games of CSM ever. He was running Abaddon, Cypher, Huron, Vashtor the Archifane, 1-2 units of Cultist Mobs, 1 Chaos Rhino, 1-2-3 units of Chaos Bikers, 1 unit of 5 Chosen with the Slanesh Mark, 2 Defilers with Nurgle, both with the Hades Las Cannons, the Master of the Maelstrom, 1 unit of 5 Corsairs, and a Venom Crawler. Naj and I played this one on Hammer and Anvil Take and Hold, and I'm going to say right now, I messed this game up pretty badly. One of the things that I've been doing in most of my games is I've been starting a unit of 10 horses, a unit of 10 Krieg, and one of the 27 Castle Bricks off the board. And that's just kind of been my default. It's been plenty good to win me almost every game I've played to thus far. And in this game, I did the exact same thing, and I had my unit of horses over here where they were close enough to like this board edge such that I could pick them up at the end of a turn. And the general game plan was I was going to have 1 Cadian brick here, a couple units of random dudes going out this way in order to flip this objective, or to try and hold this objective, as the case may be. I was going to have another Cadian brick over here, same thing, some units of dudes to go stand and or try to hold this objective. A Catachan brick had scouted into here. There were like Death Riders, like a unit of Krieg somewhere in here as well, and a unit of like Krieg Engineers moving here. And the whole idea was that all of this was going to try and make sure that this was under control. We were going to put OC on this objective. We're going to put OC on this objective, mostly as a response. It's usually easier to hold this one if you're playing on the left-hand side. And then that should be enough for us to get our initial matrix of about a 13, because I would have enough OC if Huron's unit ended up coming out and like hanging out here where they would present honestly like a lot of threat. I would be able to control where they're actually going by just like putting guys in front of them over and over again. But I came back with a 0. And the big reason for that is the horses that I started down over here, I very much autopiloted, hey, these horses are going to go back into reserve immediately. And so I ended up having a lot off the board. I had 120 points of horses. I had another 120 points of horses. I had 120 points of Cadians, 65 in the command squad, another 55 for the Castellan, 40 for the Ogryn Bodyguard, and then another 65 for the Death Corps of Krieg that I had off the board. This totals up to a total of 585 points, which is getting close to like a third of my army that is off the board. And when Naj saw this, he goes, only one of those 3 units can Rapid Ingress next turn. And I can control where they go, and what that means is that I can go for a full court shove. So Naj ended up taking like his 2 Defilers that were something like this, and they ended up splitting off. Like one of them ended up like something like this. This one ended up something like this. This one ended up something like this with Abaddon hanging out around here. The Master of the Maelstrom ended up coming out into the middle of the board. He put like 2 units of bikes here, and like the Raiders and Vashtor was here. The Venom Crawler was, I think, like over here, and they had like cultists and like cultists. And I kind of went, oh no, I have made a mistake, because Naj was right. I could only Rapid Ingress one of these things. And I chose to end up Rapid Ingressing horses over here with the idea that they were going to try and flip this objective. And then I would take like the unit of dudes that was here, they would come out, I would bring in just from normal reserves the other Cadian brick, and we were going to try and flip this objective. The one that was here wanted to come out and shoot at the Huron's unit, the Master of the Maelstrom, put enough OC onto this objective, and then hopefully win or at least scrape some points back by controlling the sides of the board. The problem was, one, I still had 120 points of horses off the board. If the horses had, instead of going off the board, had just been over here, and they had come out and like killed something, or like moved towards the Masters of the Maelstrom and tried to kill them instead, and then I had like rapid ingress these horses over here, it's possible the game would have been fine, because after doing all the shooting, I would have taken the horses and charged them into something, and they would have very likely killed it. Or alternatively, instead of these guys going here, they had come out here in order to put 2 bricks into the Masters of the Maelstrom. That's potentially another way that I could have done it when I had the extra horses over here and here, where I could do my entire army kind of all at the same time. But I tried to commit into Vashtor and the Masters of the Maelstrom, which would end up being something like this. And Vashtor has a couple of problems. One, as we had previously identified with the Sicarian Ruststalkers, Vashtor is -1 to hit, which means that I'm hitting on 5s and means that I'm winning on 5s, because I think he's also toughness 10. Maybe he's toughness 11. The difference doesn't matter here. The hazardous rolls were actually really funny, because I think I failed over like 50 weapons. I think I failed like 3 hazardous rolls, so it didn't matter very much. And then also, Naj popped the -1 to hit strat. Normally the Nurgle strat, the blown up 18, is also like stealth keyword here, and I killed like half of the Masters of Maelstrom. I killed Vashtor down to like half, and then I died. And like that's it. Like I just died immediately after that. And the unit of horses that I had like off the board just didn't matter. They couldn't do anything. I had lost too many bodies beforehand. The damage I was trying to do, like, if I kill Vashtor and if I kill as much of the Masters of the Maelstrom as I was kind of expecting, because I just wasn't factoring in the -1 to hit when I was, like, thinking about the damage that I could do to them, the game probably is fine. I probably don't get a 0. I probably still lose, just because I've gotten shoved back so much that Defilers are, like, right in the open. They're right in the middle. Abaddon is, like, right in the middle. If I had killed, like, the stuff that I had tried to kill, probably would have been okay. The other big thing that I could have tried to do is recognize, like, hey, I screwed up. Like, my opponent is just going to control the middle for a while, and I'm going to just say, I'm going to go here, I'm going to get my 5, 5, 5, and then hopefully at the end, I can get a 15 that way. And so this will put me at the 30, and then I just need to find 21 points of secondary in order to get a 1. Like, I could have pivoted to this plan as well, but these are both ways of trying to play the game that all stemmed from the fact that I started too much off the board, and I took even more things off the board and let my opponent shove at me. So as we were going through my opponent's turn 3, I just went over and was like, hey, Naj, you're a pretty good player, right? I don't know exactly what his role is within Team USA, but he has been part of the Team USA for several years in the past. I'd like to think I'm a pretty good player. I messed up this game. I do not see a path to even getting to 51 points. So I ended up conceding this one in the top of 3. I'm not going to lie, that felt pretty bad in the moment. Like, I was just like, man, I really just messed up. If I had come back with, like, the 13 that I had been expecting to come back with, it doesn't get my team to win, but at least I feel like I would have done my part, if that makes sense. Overall, the round went pretty poorly for us. I ended up coming back with a 0 when, you know, this is like a -13 of kind of what I was expecting. Griff got a 4 into Shane's Emperor's Children. Ken got a 19 into Tom's Guard. Andrew got a 0 into Tanner's Black Templars, which apparently this was a much worse matchup than several of us realized. And Torin ended up getting a 6 into Ian's Tau. So we ended up losing the round 29-71. Overall, Heroic Knight's Voltage ended up winning the whole thing. Apparently, first tiebreakers ended up being the number of game wins, which I think was not the intended tiebreaker, but ended up being what it ended up being, which meant that Rose City Ruffians ended up getting second because they had fewer game wins despite having more battle points earned. Rain City Witch Pigeons, the team that we played in the first round, ended up getting third, and we ended up walking away with fourth. Overall, I felt pretty good about the way that I played these games. I think the fact that I lost only one because I just didn't recognize the macro game plan that I needed to have for the game in a matchup that I hadn't played in a long time. And I think I was also baited a little bit by the fact that I had played against a lot of Packbound Zealots before Defilers came out, and that tends to play a much slower style of game than the one that it does with the new Defilers. And so my impression of how the matchup was supposed to go was based on information that was no longer relevant, that I had not realized was no longer relevant. And even though I'm generally very consistent, I think this is my second 0 I've ever gotten in a team's context, I still want to try and find a way to push a little bit more going forward. So that's something I'm going to be working on throughout the course of the rest of the edition and going into 11th. Overall, though, I still had a great time. It was very hot, but I played 4 games of awesome Warhammer, and I'm always looking forward to the next one. I've got another big event coming up in a couple of weeks for the Wyoming Team Championship, where I will be talking about how that goes. You will get to see all the cool new stuff that I do with Yark and Recon and whatever else I choose to play at that event. So it should be a great time. For now, though, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.